Hi everyone, in this video I would like to talk about callbacks. The first implementation of asynchronous code will be through callback functions. This is the older way of fetching data from a web server and using it in our application. We are going to talk about newer methods and newer ways in our upcoming lectures. But first we need to understand what is the underlying concept behind asynchronous programming. Now, right now, I'm not going to work with real-world data, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use set timeout to simulate, simulate the waiting of a task, like a task is waiting until the data is being fetched from the server. So that simulation is going to be done through set timeout function. So let's jump into the code. Let's say what we want to do is basically we want to grab comments, user comments. We want to fetch them from the server. Fetching them from the server means we want to grab them from the server. So I'm going to create a function that is going to be let fetch comments is going to be equal to we want to grab comments. I'm going to pass in comments here. This will be an arrow function. Now we are going to use a set timeout function. Now, what do I want to do with this set timeout function? The set timeout function is going to return to us the comments object. So its job is to grab a callback function that is an arrow function, and that arrow function is going to give us an object. So I'm going to create the arrow function. Let's first create the syntax. I would like to have that after 3000 milliseconds. So it's like I'm fetching data from the server, and after 3 seconds, the server is going to give me the data. That is basically what we're trying to do. So I wanted to return comment. This is going to be an object. The comment is going to be the key, and it's going to be the value as well. Now, in newer JavaScript, what we have is if the key and the value for any object is the same, what we can do is we can just simply provide one of them like this. And this is going to imply that the key and the value are the same. And it's going to still give us, it's going to give us an object. Now, let's go ahead and let's call this function. I'm going to say const user comments. And in here, I'm going to say fetch comments. And let's say we are going to say nice picture. And now what I would like to do is I would like to log it to the console as well. Console log user comments. And when I save it, we get undefined. And I'm going to give you like a couple of seconds to think about it. Why did we get undefined here? And the reason that we get undefined is because we are actually running the function before this set timeout is executed. We know that when JavaScript goes line by line, and when it reaches this set timeout, it's going to give this function, this set timeout API, to the browser, and the browser is going to count to 3000 milliseconds. And JavaScript immediately runs this line, and it runs this line. So until the set timeout is completed, right before it, this fetch comments is actually invoked. This function is actually invoked. But this set timeout, it requires 3 seconds to complete. Now, the solution for this would be to use callbacks. Now, callbacks are a very straightforward idea in JavaScript. It is basically when you pass in a function as an argument to another function. This could be a callback right here. This arrow function that I just highlighted right here. This is the block, and this is a callback. But the callback that I'm going to show you right now, that is basically to handle asynchronous code. It's going to have almost the same kind of syntax. I'm going to comment this one out, and I'm going to copy it down below so you can really see what is happening here and what are going to be the changes that we're going to bring into it. I'm going to add another function, another parameter here, and it is almost a common convention. When we want to work with callbacks for our asynchronous code, the callback function's name is going to be callback. We are just going to call it callback. And this is the reference for the function. Where is the function itself? I'm going to show that to you in like a few seconds. But the function invocation comes right here. This is the reference for this function. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to cut it. Let's grab our callback function and I'm going to invoke this callback function right here. And then I'm going to pass in that return comments, except I'm going to get rid of this returns, and that's it. Now, we have invoked the function right here, and it says callback is not a function because technically we have not defined our function. You know what? I'm going to grab these two lines, put them there, and I'm going to comment them out as well. This is what we have done so far. So we have invoked a callback function within the set timeout, and we have passed a reference to this function as a parameter. And we know that this function has two parameters, so it must have two arguments. So I'm going to call this function fetch comments. What is going to be the first parameter? The first parameter is comments. So it's like a single comment. I'm going to say nice picture. That is the comment. But what about the second parameter? The second parameter, if I go to it, what is it? It is basically a reference to a function. Shouldn't this be a function definition? Because we have invoked the function right here. So the second argument is going to be a function definition. And I'm going to define this. I'm going to give this a parameter of user. This is, again, another arrow function. And now you can see this syntax looks a lot like the DOM, the add event listener syntax that we've been using so much in JavaScript. I've already talked about DOM in my previous video. That was a JavaScript course a crash course for beginners. I did talk about DOM. And what we do basically in an add event listener is, for example, we grab an element like an input element, and on that input element, we say add event listener. This event listener is going to grab an event, let's say click or change or whatever. And I'm just going to say click. And then in here, we basically provide a callback function. And whenever the user clicks inside this input, this function is going to run. It is the same thing in here. So you can see this syntax is the same as this syntax. We have some sort of a string here. There we go. This is the string. And then we have a callback function. So you are already familiar with this. This is just like a different context. It's not a different idea, but a different context. So when we are fetching the user data or the user comments, what do we want to do? We basically want to take a look at those comments that we have fetched from the server. So I'm going to say console.log. Let's first take a look at our user, and I'm going to save this. And now we can see the function waits for 3 seconds, and after 3 seconds, it gave us an object, comments, and then the value. Again, if the key and value of an object is the same, you can just shorten it to one thing, and it is going to be implied or inferred that it is actually an object. This is a valid object syntax. And now you can see it says comments, nice picture. If you want to grab the comment itself, since this user is actually an object, I can even show that to you. Console log type of user. This is going to return to us, of course, after 3 seconds, an object. So the dot notation has to work perfectly fine with that. I'm going to keep that there, and let's bring it down here. So as soon as I say dot, all the methods available on this user, they are going to be shown. But I want to grab the comment, and I'm going to save this. You're going to wait 3 seconds. Maybe 3 seconds is a lot. And now you can see it says nice picture. So this is your very first venture into the world of asynchronous programming. And that is basically a buzzword for when a task is very long and it takes some time and you don't want your application to wait for that task to end. As the task is actually counting down and you're seeing the task, as the task is being fetched, you want to do other stuff as well. That is basically the whole premise of asynchronous programming. But how you are going to do this, it depends on several different techniques in JavaScript. The first one and the oldest one is callback. And in our next lecture, we are going to talk about promises, a newer way. And then after that, we are going to talk about async await. Now, in our next lectures, I'm going to keep everything very simple so you can really see how these work. And I'm going to show you actually a more real world example of a mock server, and then I'm going to show you how we can fetch data from that server, use it in our application. And that's going to be a very good entry point into the world of asynchronous programming and consuming APIs. We're going to talk a lot about that in our next lecture. See you then.